For 3 years, Cari Farver's mother received text messages from her daughter. Birthday wishes, random updates, strange, angry rants. But Nancy Rainey had a mother's instinct screaming at her that something was wrong, because the woman sending those messages wasn't her daughter. Cari Farver had been dead since November 2012, murdered and burned, her body disposed of like garbage. And the killer? She was sitting at home, obsessively typing out thousands of messages, pretending to be the woman she'd just stabbed to death. Welcome back to Dark True Crime. Before we dive into one of the most twisted catfishing murder cases you'll ever hear, hit that subscribe button right now. Because this story shows how digital evidence can expose a killer who thought she could hide behind fake accounts and stolen identities for years. November 2012, Omaha, Nebraska. Dave Krupa, a 35-year-old mechanic, was starting fresh after splitting from his longtime girlfriend Amy Flora, with whom he had 2 children. He wasn't looking for anything serious, just casual dating. So he signed up for an online dating site and met Shanna Golyar, who went by Liz. She was a single mother, and when Dave told her up front he wasn't interested in commitment, Liz claimed she was perfectly fine with that arrangement. Then, in October 2012, Cari Farver walked into Dave's auto repair shop. She was 37 years old, from the small town of Macedonia, Iowa, about 45 minutes from Omaha. Cari worked in computer programming and had driven to Dave's shop for routine car maintenance. The moment their eyes met, Dave later told ABC News, there was a little spark. They started dating, and Dave was immediately drawn to Cari's personality. She was smart, successful, caring, with a teenage son named Max back in Iowa. They'd only been seeing each other for about 2 weeks when something happened that would change everything. On November 13th, 2012, Cari stayed overnight at Dave's apartment in Omaha. The next morning, she left for work. Dave kissed her goodbye, expecting to see her again soon. But Cari never made it to work. She vanished completely, and nobody would see Cari Farver alive ever again, except the messages started almost immediately. Text messages from Cari's phone saying she'd decided to take time for herself, that she was quitting her job, that she needed space. At first, Dave assumed Cari had gotten cold feet about the relationship and decided to back off. It had only been 2 weeks. Maybe she'd realized casual dating wasn't for her. But then the messages got weird, and they didn't stop. For days, then weeks, then months, and eventually years, Dave Krupa received a constant barrage of texts and emails from accounts linked to Cari Farver. Thousands upon thousands of messages. Some were romantic, begging Dave to take her back. Others were viciously angry, threatening, obsessive. The messages claimed Cari was watching Dave, that she had a spare key to his apartment, and would let herself in when he wasn't home. She sent photos of herself, supposedly standing outside his workplace, his home, places he frequented. The harassment was relentless and terrifying. If you've ever been the victim of online harassment or stalking, or you know someone who has, drop a comment below. Because what Dave experienced for 3 years was psychological torture, never knowing when the next threatening message would arrive. But here's the truly sick twist. The harassment wasn't just directed at Dave. It extended to Liz Golyar, the woman Dave had been casually dating before meeting Cari. Liz reported to police that someone had painted "Whore from Dave" on her garage wall. Liz claimed Cari had created a fake obituary for her online. The harassment against Liz seemed to escalate right alongside the messages Dave was receiving. And the threats turned real in August 2013 when Liz's house was deliberately set on fire, killing all 4 of her pets. Both Dave and Liz received emails purportedly from Cari claiming responsibility for the arson. The message was clear. Cari Farver was dangerous, obsessed, and willing to kill. The bizarre harassment actually brought Dave and Liz closer together. They rekindled their relationship, bonding over their shared trauma of being stalked by this apparently unhinged woman. Dave repeatedly changed his phone number, his email address, even moved to Council Bluffs, Iowa in February 2015, trying desperately to escape the abuse. Nothing worked. The messages kept coming. Meanwhile, Cari's mother, Nancy Rainey, was receiving her own disturbing messages from social media accounts appearing to belong to her daughter. Cryptic posts telling Nancy not to look for her, that she was fine, that she wanted to be left alone. But Nancy knew something was terribly wrong. Cari had a teenage son who she loved more than anything. She'd never just abandoned Max without explanation. Nancy filed a missing persons report with the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office in Council Bluffs, Iowa, just days after Cari disappeared. But because messages kept coming from Cari's accounts, because it appeared she was alive and active on social media, the case went cold. Police assumed Cari had voluntarily disappeared and was using technology to stay connected while avoiding face-to-face contact. For 3 years, this nightmare continued. 3 years of constant messages. 3 years of Dave and Liz living in fear. 3 years of Nancy desperately trying to find her daughter while receiving messages telling her to stop looking. Then in April 2015, something happened that would finally crack the case wide open. Dave discovered that one of his guns, a Ruger .357 revolver, had been stolen from his apartment. Around the same time, Liz Golyar walked into the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office to file yet another harassment report. But this time, she wasn't blaming Cari Farver. This time, Liz claimed the real stalker was Dave's ex-girlfriend Amy Flora, the mother of his 2 children. Liz told Detective Ryan Avis that she'd started to realize maybe Cari had never been stalking them at all. Maybe it had been Amy all along, disguising herself as Cari, trying to terrorize them and destroy Dave's relationships. Like I said, they only dated for 2 weeks, and I don't understand why a person would still be stalking him almost 3 years later, Liz said in her interview. I would find it more reasonable to believe that his kid's mom is the one. Detective Avis and investigator Jim Doty had recently taken over the Cari Farver case, and they'd been approaching it from a unique angle. While Avis worked the case assuming Cari was alive until he hit a dead end, Doty worked it assuming Cari was dead. And Liz's sudden pivot to blaming Amy Flora immediately raised red flags. Just one day after Liz's interview, she placed a frantic 911 call. She claimed she'd been shot in the leg at Big Lake Park. When police arrived, Liz said she'd been attacked by a woman matching Amy Flora's description, who'd allegedly stolen Dave's gun and used it to shoot her. Investigators immediately suspected Liz had shot herself. The wound was superficial, perfectly positioned in a way that suggested self-infliction. And the story about Amy Flora attacking her made no sense. Why would Dave's ex-wife, who'd moved on with her life and was focused on raising their children, suddenly become a violent stalker? The detectives decided to play along. They pretended to believe Liz's story and convinced her to help them get Amy to incriminate herself. And that's when the brilliant trap was set. Soon, investigators started receiving emails purportedly from Amy Flora, confessing to terrible things. The emails detailed how Amy had stabbed Cari Farver in her own car, how she'd burned Cari's body and disposed of it, how she'd been impersonating Cari for 3 years to terrorize Dave and Liz. But when detectives traced those emails, they didn't lead to Amy Flora. They led straight back to Shanna Liz Golyar. She'd sent them herself, believing she was helping investigators build a case against Amy, while actually building the case against herself. Investigators immediately got a warrant to search Cari Farver's abandoned car more thoroughly. The vehicle had been recovered about a month after Cari disappeared and had been sitting in impound. When they examined it in 2015, they found something the initial search had missed: bloodstains beneath the fabric of the passenger seat. Cari's blood. They also found Liz Golyar's fingerprint on a mint container inside the car. Liz had been in Cari's vehicle, and Cari's blood was there. The pieces were finally coming together. During a search of Liz Golyar's home, investigators found items that belonged to Cari Farver. A digital camera, a camcorder containing a video of Cari talking about someone vandalizing her car, time-stamped just 2 days before she went missing. Why would Liz have Cari's personal belongings if Cari had supposedly run away and been stalking them for 3 years? But the case was still largely circumstantial. They had suspicious evidence, conflicting stories, and a web of digital harassment that seemed to point to Liz. But they didn't have a body. They didn't have a confession. And they couldn't definitively prove Cari Farver was dead. Then Dave Kropa provided investigators with something that would change everything: a tablet he'd owned since he started dating both Liz and Cari back in 2012. That tablet, which Dave had rarely used and eventually forgot about, contained a treasure trove of data that nobody had examined before. On that tablet, investigators found something that made their blood run cold. Make sure you're subscribed to Dark True Crime, because what digital forensics expert Tony Kava discovered on that tablet and the disturbing photograph found on Liz Golyar's memory card would finally prove that Cari Farver had been murdered on November 13th, 2012, and that Shanna Golyar had spent 3 years impersonating her victim. Tony Kava, the Pottawatomie County IT supervisor, spent thousands of hours analyzing the digital evidence in this case. He examined the tablet Dave had given them, pulling data, recovering deleted files, tracing IP addresses and account logins. And what he found was absolutely damning. The tablet showed that all of those messages supposedly sent by Cari Farver, the thousands of texts and emails that had been tormenting Dave and Liz for 3 years, had actually been sent from devices linked to Liz Golyar. The emails sent to Dave, the texts sent to Cari's mother Nancy, the Facebook posts, the threats, the romantic messages, the angry rants. Every single one had come from Liz. Kava discovered Liz had created multiple fake email accounts and social media profiles pretending to be Cari. She'd even created fake profiles for other people, including one pretending to be Amy Flora to make her elaborate story more believable. The level of obsession was staggering. Liz had been living a double life, spending hours every single day crafting messages as Cari, responding to herself as Liz, creating an entire fictional narrative about a stalker who didn't exist. But investigators still needed something more concrete. They needed proof that Cari was actually dead. And that's when they found the memory card. During their investigation, detectives discovered a memory card linked to Liz Golyar. On that card was a photograph that would haunt everyone who saw it. The image showed what appeared to be a decomposing human foot with a distinctive tattoo. A tattoo that exactly matched one Cari Farver had on her own foot. Prosecutors believed the photo had been taken shortly after Liz murdered Cari, when the body was still identifiable. Liz had kept this trophy photo, this piece of evidence, proving what she'd done, probably never imagining investigators would find it years later. On December 22, 2016, more than 4 years after Cari Farver disappeared, Shanna Liz Golyar was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Despite Cari's body never being recovered, prosecutors were confident they had enough evidence to convict. The arrest was a massive relief to Nancy Rainey, who'd spent 4 years living in hell, receiving messages from accounts pretending to be her daughter, never knowing if Cari was really alive or if something terrible had happened. Detective Doty would later say, "The best part of it was being able to go to Nancy and tell her we've arrested somebody for the murder of your daughter. That was what made working this whole case worth it." But would a judge convict someone of murder without a body? Could the digital evidence, the photograph, the blood in the car, and Liz's web of lies be enough to prove beyond reasonable doubt that she'd killed Cari Farver? And what would the trial reveal about the depths of Liz's obsession with Dave Krupa and the lengths she'd gone to eliminate her romantic rival? The trial of Shanna Golyar began in May 2017 at Douglas County Court in Omaha. Liz had waived her right to a jury trial, choosing instead to have her fate decided by Judge Timothy Burns alone. It was a bench trial, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. Prosecutor Brenda Beadle, the Douglas County Chief Deputy Attorney, laid out the state's case in her opening statement. This is a bizarre and twisted case of veiled attraction. It's about an obsessive woman that would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. What Liz wanted was Dave Krupa, and she'd murdered Cari Farver to eliminate her competition. The prosecution's theory was straightforward but chilling. On November 13th or 14th, 2012, Liz Golyar lured or followed Cari Farver and attacked her in Cari's own car. Liz stabbed Cari multiple times in the chest and stomach, killing her in the passenger seat. That's why Cari's blood was found beneath the seat fabric, and why Liz's fingerprint was on the mint container. After murdering Cari, Liz burned the body to destroy evidence and disposed of it in a way that ensured it would never be found. She kept Cari's phone, her personal items, and began the elaborate 3-year charade of impersonating her victim. Every message, every post, Every threat that supposedly came from Cari was actually Liz, methodically crafting a fictional stalker to cover up her crime. But Liz's defense attorney argued the state couldn't meet its burden of proof without a recovered body. He pointed out there was no murder weapon, no crime scene with definitive forensic evidence, no eyewitnesses. Everything was circumstantial. The defense suggested Cari might still be alive somewhere, that she'd voluntarily disappeared and was actually the one sending those messages. The prosecution countered with overwhelming digital evidence. Tony Kava took the stand for 3 full days, walking the judge through his analysis of the thousands of messages, the fake accounts, the IP addresses, the login data. He showed how every single communication supposedly from Cari had originated from devices linked to Liz Golyar. The tablet Dave provided contained irrefutable proof that Liz had been posing as Cari for years. Prosecutors also presented those disturbing emails where Amy Flora confessed to killing Cari. The emails detailed how Cari had been stabbed, burned, put in garbage bags, and thrown in a dumpster. Liz had written these emails herself, supposedly to frame Amy, but they actually read like a confession with just the names changed. And then there was the photograph. The image of a decomposing foot with Cari's distinctive tattoo found on Liz's own memory card. The defense tried to argue it could be anyone's foot, but the tattoo was unique and matched Cari's exactly. Why would Liz have a photo of a decomposing body part with Cari's tattoo if she hadn't killed her? The arson charge was also significant. Prosecutors argued Liz had set her own house on fire in August 2013, killing her 4 pets, just to make it seem like Cari was escalating her harassment. Liz sent emails from Cari's account claiming responsibility for the fire, further solidifying the narrative that Cari was a dangerous stalker. If you're watching this and thinking about how much time and energy Liz devoted to this elaborate deception, drop a comment below. Because for 3 years, Liz spent hours every single day crafting messages, maintaining fake accounts, responding to herself, all while pretending to be a victim of the very harassment she was creating. On May 24th, 2017, Judge Timothy Burns delivered his verdict. The courtroom was packed with Cari's family, Dave Krupa, investigators who'd worked the case, and media covering the sensational trial. Burns said the defense's argument about needing a body was refuted by the overwhelming amount of evidence presented by the state. Then Judge Burns said words Nancy Rainey had been waiting nearly 5 years to hear. Cari Farver did not voluntarily disappear and drop off the face of the earth.
The amount of evidence presented by the state during this trial. Cari Farver did not voluntarily disappear and drop off the face of the earth. Very sadly, she was murdered.
Very sadly, she was murdered. Guilty. Guilty of first-degree murder. Guilty of second-degree arson. Nancy Rainey and her family burst into tears, hugging each other as the relief and grief washed over them. Nancy later said, "It was just a total relief to me, and I just started crying." After 4.5 years of torture, receiving messages from accounts pretending to be her daughter, Nancy finally had confirmation that Cari was gone and that her killer would face justice. On August 15th, 2017, Shanna Golyar was sentenced to life in prison for first-degree murder with an additional 18 to 20 years for arson. The sentences would run consecutively. Liz showed little emotion during sentencing, still maintaining she was innocent, that she'd been framed. The conviction and sentencing were monumental victories, but they didn't bring closure. Cari's body has never been recovered. Nancy Rainey doesn't have a grave to visit, no final resting place where she can say goodbye to her daughter. That's a cruelty Liz Golyar inflicted that can never be undone. Liz appealed her conviction to the Nebraska Supreme Court, arguing the lack of a body meant there was insufficient evidence to convict her of first-degree murder. She also claimed her attorneys provided ineffective counsel. The Nebraska Supreme Court rejected all her arguments, stating there was overwhelming evidence proving her guilt. The conviction was upheld. As of now, Shanna Golyar is serving her life sentence at the Nebraska Correctional Center for Women. She'll spend the rest of her life behind bars, where she belongs. But the aftermath of this case extends far beyond Liz's conviction. Dave Krupa had to process that for 3 years. He'd been in a relationship with the woman who murdered someone he'd been dating. He'd been manipulated, terrorized, gaslit. Every message he thought came from Cari had actually been from Liz, sitting right beside him, pretending to be just as scared as he was. Nancy Rainey had to come to terms with the fact that every message she'd received supposedly from Cari, every birthday wish, every update, had been from her daughter's killer. Liz had taunted Nancy for years, using Cari's accounts to tell Nancy not to look for her, to leave her alone, all while knowing Cari was dead. And Cari's teenage son, Max, grew up without his mother, believing she'd abandoned him, only to learn years later that she'd been murdered shortly after telling him she was going to Omaha for a few days. Tony Kava, the IT specialist who spent thousands of hours on this case, was later featured in multiple documentaries about Cari's murder. NBC's Dateline did an episode called Scorned that examined the case in depth, with interviews from Kava, the investigators, and Nancy Rainey. Then, in February 2024, Netflix released Lover, Stalker, Killer, a documentary that brought Cari's case to a global audience. The film shot to Netflix's #1 position the day it premiered, introducing millions of people to this twisted story of obsession, murder, and impersonation. Lifetime Television also produced a movie about the case and donated to the Cari Farver Memorial Scholarship at Iowa Western Community College. The scholarship was established to keep Cari's memory alive by supporting students pursuing careers in information technology, the field Cari worked in. But there's one more disturbing detail about this case that shows just how dangerous digital impersonation can be. Even after Liz's conviction, fake Cari Farver profiles remained active on Facebook for years. Tony Kava spent years trying to get Facebook to remove them, explaining they'd been created by a convicted murderer and used to commit crimes. Facebook eventually removed most of the profiles, but some remained online as late as 2019. Think about that. A murdered woman's identity being used by her killer, with profiles still active years after the conviction, continuing to exist in digital space, even though Cari Farver had been dead since 2012. This case revolutionized how law enforcement approaches digital evidence in homicide investigations. Tony Kava's meticulous work became a blueprint for other departments. The fact that prosecutors successfully convicted someone of murder without a body, relying primarily on digital forensics, set important legal precedents. It also raised awareness about the dangers of catfishing, digital stalking, and identity theft. Liz Golyar didn't just murder Cari Farver. She stole Cari's entire digital identity for 3 years, tarnishing Cari's reputation in the community, making people believe Cari was an unhinged stalker. As Detective Doty said, their investigation set the record straight that it wasn't Cari sending the harassing messages. It was Liz pretending to be Cari. The psychology of what Liz did is almost incomprehensible. For 3 years, she maintained this elaborate deception, spending hours crafting messages in Cari's voice, threatening herself to make the stalker narrative believable, setting her own house on fire and killing her own pets just to bolster the story. The level of obsession and commitment to the lie is staggering. And all of it was because Liz couldn't accept that Dave Kropa, a man who'd explicitly told her he didn't want a committed relationship, had developed feelings for someone else. Rather than move on, rather than accept that Dave wasn't interested in exclusivity, Liz murdered her rival and spent 3 years playing out a sick fantasy where she could be with Dave while simultaneously being his protector from the dangerous stalker. Make sure you're subscribed to Dark True Crime, because next time, we're covering another case where someone thought they could hide behind technology, where digital evidence exposed a killer's lies, and where justice finally caught up to someone who believed they were untouchable. Until then, remember that your digital footprint is permanent. Every message you send, every account you create, every login you make, it all leaves traces that can be recovered by forensic experts. You can't hide in the digital world. Eventually, the truth comes out. Cari Farver was a 37-year-old computer programmer, a devoted mother to her son Max, a daughter, a friend. She deserved so much better than being murdered by a jealous rival and having her identity stolen for 3 years. She deserved to watch her son grow up, to build her career, to find love and happiness. Instead, she was killed shortly after meeting someone she liked, and her killer spent years impersonating her. sending thousands of messages, destroying her reputation and tormenting the people who loved her. But technology, the same technology Liz used to carry out her deception, became the tool that exposed her crimes. Tony Kava's forensic analysis, Dave's forgotten tablet, the photograph on the memory card, the digital trail Liz left behind, all of it combined to prove Cari Farver had been murdered and Shanna Golyar was the killer. Nancy Rainey still doesn't have her daughter's body to bury, but she has justice. She knows the truth, and she knows that the woman who tortured her family for years is spending the rest of her life in prison. Cari Farver's legacy lives on through the scholarship in her name, through the documentary films that tell her story, and through the changes in how law enforcement approaches digital evidence. Her case proved that even without a body, even when a killer tries to make it seem like the victim is still alive, justice can still be served. Thank you for watching. Stay safe online, be careful who you trust, and remember that obsession and jealousy can turn deadly in the hands of someone who's willing to cross every line. I'll see you in the next video.